Hello and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast. My name is Taylor, and today I'm joined by a guest who I believe has more marathon experience than all of the guests that I've interviewed so far combined. He has been running for the last 12 years, and in that time has completed 12 marathons and 10 half marathons. I'm so excited to talk to him today. I'm sure he's got lots of tips and tricks for us, so let's jump right in. Please welcome Scott. Scott, thank you so much for coming on today. It's great to meet you. I want to kind of start from the beginning. I've already done your intro, so everyone knows you've ran 12 marathons, 10 half marathons. You've got quite the experience in the running world. But taking it way back, how did you get into running originally?
Uh, Honestly, it starts. I'm like all of 5'6" if it's humid and I'm fully expanded. So, so my wife and I, we were at a weird point in our life where we were watching a infomercial on a Sunday afternoon, and I had gained a lot of weight actually, and God, I hope they don't hear this, but my brother and my dad are both pretty overweight, and they're
Mhm.
all about the same height, and I was like, I'm just not going to do that. So I actually got into like PX. What is it called? What is it
Oh,
called?
like P90X?
P90X. I was going to
Yeah.
say PX90, P90X. So all of a sudden, we were getting in good shape and whatnot. Started doing things at the church with that and Insanity. And then some guys at the church were like, hey, you should come run. And we were just running around the parking lots of a high school every morning and stuff like that. So all of a sudden, a 5K came up. And I went up to do the 5K. And I think I was about 40 already when I just started running. I mean, I didn't do it in high school really. I should have, but I was a musician. So I started, I did this 5K and I signed up and I just went out and ran it as hard as I could. And all of a sudden I came in like third place in my age
Oh,
group.
wow.
Yeah, in my age group. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. And they were
Yeah.
like, and everybody at my church was so mad at me. They were so mad. They were like, you don't even run. Like, what are you doing in third place? So I was like, well, maybe I should actually practice. That'd be a good idea. So then I
Yeah.
started actually like practicing running, doing intervals and whatever else they told me to do, reading some books. And then all of a sudden, and this was probably in, gosh, let's see, this would have been in maybe May or April when I did the 5K. And by May, because then by February I signed up for my first half marathon. And
Okay. Yeah.
I was like, let's just see what happens. So I signed up for St. Pete Rock and Roll, and I went down with a buddy named Bobby. And all of a sudden, I ran my first half marathon in like 1:46. And I was
Wow.
like, and I didn't know. I was like, I got done. I was like, is this good? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously
Yeah.
not in the top five or anything crazy. So I was like, is this good? And people are like, holy crap. Well, that kind of like feeds into me. And I was
Sure.
like, I've just got to see what happens. So then I started doing the long runs on the weekends and the whole deal. And that November, I'd been running I guess it was, no, I guess it was actually September, October for the 5K because it was February for the St. Pete's half. And then right around a year of running, November that year, I did Chickamauga, which is a full marathon at Chickamauga Battlefield, North Georgia, right in Chattanooga area. And I signed up for the full and went out and just did it with a buddy of mine named David. And he was like, oh yeah, it's a great course. You go out of the army base or whatever, and then you run two giant loops and then it comes back in. I'm like, well, that sounds horrible, but okay. So, so we ran the first loop and I was really doing good. And then I ran the second loop and I was wearing these shoes, and I don't really want to blast them, but it was these shoes that have these treads underneath the bottom. You're supposed to stay up
Mhm.
on the balls of your feet.
Right.
I don't remember the names of them actually because but anyway. So as you get tired, you tend to fall backwards.
Right.
So
Right.
I was falling back on the back of my foot, and this tread that was at the bottom of my forefront became almost like you were stepping on a twig every time. And I think it was just
Mm.
a weird pressure point. So it started really hurting. And then I
Sure.
crossed the railroad tracks about mile 24, 25, and I heard pop. And I went, oh God,
Oh
that
no.
really hurt. And I broke the third metatarsal in my foot. So it's
Oh my
like
gosh.
you look at
Yeah.
your hand, since you and I are able to see each other, it'd be this
Yeah.
bone, the middle bone of your foot. So
Wow.
it kind of fractured. And so I'm running the rest of the race. I'm like kind of hobbling, but I finished the race in, I don't know, 3 hours and, 58 minutes or something crazy.
Still great, all things considered. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any better, right? I'm just like finishing,
Yeah.
like, but then I can't barely walk to the car. And so we
Right.
went to grab something to eat, and I couldn't even walk in the restaurant hardly. And by the time I got home, he's like, just put some ice on it. You'll be fine. It's your first
Yeah.
race. You're just sore. I got home, put ice on it. Went to the foot and ankle specialist the next day. He's like, you runners, I swear, is you broke your foot, dude. And I was like, what do you mean I broke my foot? And he's like, you need to wear this boot for a couple weeks because there's really nothing we can do about it. He goes,
Yeah.
I swear, you runners. He goes, the only thing worse than you guys is gymnasts.
Yeah. Just
And he was
the
like,
group that's gonna push themselves through anything. Yeah.
yeah, it's just people who are driven. So
Hmm.
anyway, so I recovered from that, and I was like, never again, never again. And then 3 weeks later, I signed up for another marathon. I'm sure. So
It hooks you. It does.
yeah, it's just one of those weird sicknesses we have, because then it became, well, how fast can I go? And then
Yeah.
it better and better and better and better. I did Savannah and Publix and several others, and it was a lot of fun, but it was also just extremely strenuous on my body.
Sure.
So so then it took all Saturday morning. I'm out there running at 6 a.m. and I'm running until 10:30, and I'm like running 3.5 hours or whatever. And it just became this one thing. Then all of a sudden, quite honestly, how it kind of started to take on its own life, because then somebody said, you should try for Boston. And I was like, why? What? And they're like, yeah, it's the only
Yeah.
Boston, that's the only marathon you really have to qualify for, other than like
Hmm.
US Olympic trials and all this. I was like, no. So then it took about 2.5 years. And I would come in, and I think at my age group at the time, it was 3:15. I would come in at 3:18.5,
Mm.
because the last 2 miles would fall apart. And
Hmm.
if you hit the wall, or if you just didn't hydrate correctly, or nutrition, I mean, it was a million things, right? And it
Sure.
took me about 2.5 or 3 years to qualify. And when I finally qualified, I qualified on one outside of Atlanta called the Silver Comet Trail, which is an old railroad bed. So it doesn't have a lot of up and down. It's like 3% maximum. So it's
Hmm.
pretty level, but it's just the most boring run. It's basically a black trail through the woods. And then you run out there and then you run back. And it's just really boring. But I did it one year, came in at 3:18.5. And 3:15 was the qualifier, so I didn't qualify because I fell apart in the last couple miles. The next year, I was 43. So what's interesting about Boston is, to qualify for Boston, it's what age will you be when you run Boston?
For the
So,
qualifying time.
right. So I was 43.5, but I wouldn't be 45. I would be 45 when I ran Boston. So I qualified within the 45 window.
Got it. Okay.
So it went from 3:15 to 3:25, and I ran a 3:20.10 or 3:20.09. And
Hmm.
so I was 4 minutes and some change before the qualifier. And, just because you qualify basically qualifies you to sign up for the race. And then,
Right. Doesn't guarantee
you're probably
anything.
well aware of this, but it's like, then they just start shaving it down. And I think the actual for my age group, you had to end up with a 3:21.40. I mean, I wasn't that far in, and I
Yeah.
beat it by almost 5 minutes, and it was just barely still in. But so I qualified in 15, but that was on Halloween on 2015. I didn't get to run it till April 2017. So
Mm.
a year and a half
So you had
later.
some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was crazy. And I was running the whole time
Wow.
with a hernia, the sports hernia.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you were pushing through quite a bit through this whole
Well,
thing.
you can't take time off, because as soon as I took time off, my speed went out the window. It just,
Right. You have to start all the way over.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was brutal.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Sorry,
So you had quite the start.
it was very long-winded.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. So yeah, so I think like everybody, you started at the 5K distance just to kind of dip your toes in the water, and started to get some validation from the group that you were running with.
Yeah.
What was the training plan like back then, from like 5K to half marathon? Were you following anything, or mostly just following the group that you were a part of?
For a while there, it was just run 5 miles every day, and then on the weekends start running the 13 to 18s.
Hmm.
And start trying to escalate. And we were kind of doing like the Jeff Galloway. At one point, I did a little bit of the walk and run, and then I realized it drove me bat crazy to watch somebody pass me while I was doing the walk. I couldn't. So then I started doing just some kind of trainings that I found online, with different philosophies. And then at some point I switched it up, and I don't know that it helped me or didn't, but there's one called Run Less, Run Faster.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically says only run 3 times a week, but you run one like it's kind of like intervals. One was like a tempo run and then a long run. So you've always got some aims, and you basically go, here's what I want to qualify for, and you put the math in there, and then it tells you, here's what your intervals need to be, here's what your pace runs, your tempo runs need to be at. And it was
Hmm.
cool, but man, it was hard. I mean, the tempo
Yeah.
run, they had you going some really, really fast paces. So it
Yeah.
was hard. And then the idea is that on the other 2 or 3 days a week, you would do things like swimming or bicycling or something else to offset more of a aerobic cardio thing. And
Yeah.
I didn't really do that correctly. So I don't think it played well for me. So I was just better running 4 to 5 days a week and trying to get, 35 to 45 miles in.
Yeah.
But again, that took a lot of half Saturdays. And then by the time I got home by 10 o'clock or whatever, I look at my wife and go, I'm going back to bed. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
exhausted.
exactly. The whole day is shot.
And the reason we had to run so early is because my running partner was a vet. So he had to be at work at 9.
Mm.
So we had to be
Mm.
done by 7:30. So we would run at
Sure.
3:30 or 4 in the morning just to get
Oh
it done.
my gosh. Jeez. So yeah, so your whole day was over by, like you said, 9 or 10 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning.
We were doing some stupid stuff. We were running at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I had some running partners named Sean and Luis, and we would do
Yeah.
some crazy stuff at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning to run on Saturdays. And they were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "But we had to get in before everybody had to go to work."
Right, right, right. Well, that's great that you had a community around you as you were kind of getting started. So you had people
Yeah,
to look up to and to train with and to get advice from, I guess, because I think there's a lot of people that are starting out on their own and aren't really sure where to look for resources and things
that
like
is a
that. I think
hard
community is
thing to
huge.
do alone. That is a
Hmm.
really hard thing to do alone. I mean, what I found was, and I didn't get involved in this group, but had I not had my own little group that ran at the school, I would have gotten it. And the reason I met these guys, by the way, was through a 5K where I came in right behind him. And I said,
Mm,
dude,
oh, cool.
I thought you would totally slow down and I'd be able to catch you. He goes, I thought you were going to catch me. And I realized at the end of it, I had only run like a half ever. And he had just finished running 2013 Boston
Oh,
when
wow.
when the bombing had happened. He had just finished Boston, and I was like, well, no wonder he didn't slow down. He had so much more longevity than me.
Yeah.
So it was crazy. But we became friends with that, and then we became running partners. Um, all that to say, I would, if I had to start all over again, I would find the best running shoe store, and they always have running groups.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Like a Fleet Feet or something like that that you
Correct.
can
Yep.
you can find a running group through. Yeah,
That'd
totally.
be the
Would
best
agree
thing
with
in the
that for
world
sure.
because I didn't take advantage of that because I had my own little group finally. But I would, if I had to start all over again, that's exactly what I would do first.
That's cool. Yeah, and I mean that's part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast, to be quite honest, is because when I was starting out I didn't have a lot of resources. I didn't know that I could go to a local running store and find a group to run with, to ask questions to, things like that. So somewhere where you can hear from other people who went from maybe zero or maybe, are partway through their running journey to the marathon distance, having one area to do that I think is helpful for sure.
And it's just a
Um,
great relationship builder too. I mean, it's you'd be surprised. I mean, and you probably know this already, but it's like amazing how many good conversations happen on a run.
oh yeah, especially the longer distances, you got a lot of time to talk to people.
When everybody gets quiet, it's time to finish.
Yep, exactly, exactly. That's great. So, so when do you feel like you really caught the bug? Because the marathon distance isn't something you just wake up and decide you're going to commit to. So, where in your first, I guess, year of running did you finally decide, all right, I'm gonna do the full thing?
I did the 5K just for fun. It was a fundraiser, I think, for my kids' school or something like that. I mean, it was one of those things where I just did it for fun. And then I was
Hmm.
like, I got done with that, and they were like, wow, you should try the half. And I was like, okay, the rock and roll stuff is just fun. You get away to travel. It was when I did the half and did a good time that somebody was like, you're actually really decent at this. Like, you should consider. I was like, there's no way in the world I'm doing a marathon. No
Yeah,
way. And then all of a sudden, it was like, 3 weeks after you say that, you're like, I think I'm signed up for a marathon.
yeah,
And then it just became interesting because then it just became this personal challenge. And I think that's the interesting thing is like, it's kind of like golf. People would say that about golf or tennis. Like you can't blame anybody else.
yeah,
It is you and you and you. I mean, you can
yeah,
have bad weather, you can have bad nutrition, you can have bad muscles, you can do whatever you want, but it's you against you
yeah.
at the end of the day. So it's really, and I'm all about just that self improvement thing. So I really wanted to see what I could do, and it
Hmm.
brought out really probably the best parts of me because it really showed me like, wow, you're really digging for this thing, and it was
Yeah.
painful. I remember we got out of that first half marathon. We were driving back from St. Pete back to Atlanta, And I remember stopping at a Subway sandwich shop to get some lunch, and I looked like a 95-year-old man trying to get out of that car.
Uh-huh.
It was so painful.
Everything hurts. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just, but it was also the flip side of that is there's something exhilarating about really pushing yourself to new limits.
Totally. Yeah, and I think you have to cross the finish line a couple of times too before you realize that like you
Yeah.
have to run the 5K and run the half marathon and be in the race environment to really catch the spark in the beginning. I feel like once you've got a good base, I think you can just commit to whatever you put your mind to. But in the beginning, I think the finish line feeling is huge.
Yes. Yes. Very much so. And then what's interesting is the finish line becomes almost a nemesis, which is weird because as I got, I think, and I was talking to somebody about this recently that you know, a mutual friend of ours. The finish line kind of becomes, well, you think the finish line is going to be a happy part where you finish across the finish line, you're like, oh, I'll be happy if, and then you get
Hmm.
across the finish line, you're like, good grief, I'm not happy. Now, what's the problem with that? And it's
Yeah.
just that whole element that really, if I could go back and embrace it, I would embrace the journey more because the finish line
Mm.
is always a moving target.
Right. Right. That's interesting. I don't think I've hit that point yet, so I'm interested in that side. So when did that shift happen for you, where the finish line wasn't so much a celebration of what you just did and became, something that kept moving?
I think I really, yeah, I think it was honestly, I mean, I think when I qualified for Boston, I mean, I had told myself if I qualify for Boston, I will finally be happy. And I crossed the line and I
Mm.
was happy, but at the same time, I was like, wait, it's still empty. Like, it's weird.
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
okay, now I got to run another race still. And
Yeah.
wow, now I did it. Now I did it. Now what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I did an ultra and I enjoyed the heck out of it. But it
Yeah.
was just, again, it was that element of like, I never did ultras because I was always training for Boston. Um,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to get hurt in the woods, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it was just this interesting element of life that I've really realized, kind of at a bigger picture, is that it's cool to hit those goals, but
Yeah.
you gotta realize those goals are just another step on your pathway, and that the finish line is kind of like the horizon of the sun. You just you'll never catch it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, the if-then statements just don't work. If I
Yeah.
do this, then I'll be happy. No, you won't, because then it's like, what's the next goal?
Right, right. That's interesting. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day. I think it was, I think Tony Robbins was a guest on it, but they were saying something really similar. It was like, um, progress isn't, or I'm sorry, the finish line isn't what make people happy. It's progress that makes people happy. Because when you
Yes.
hit the finish line, the feeling of feeling accomplished is finite. It only lasts, it could last a couple of hours for some people, it could last a couple of weeks for some people, but then you're always left with this feeling of like, what am I doing from here? Did I
Yeah.
actually accomplish something? Was that the goal? Do I have another goal? It's
Yeah.
always a feeling of emptiness. So I think that's a really good point of just finding success in the progress of the whole thing.
Well, it's 100% true, and it's the Tony Robbins philosophy. Like if you're not living, if you're not growing, you're dying, kind of a philosophy. And it's like
Yeah,
it took me a long time. I mean, I'm a good bit older now, but it took me probably a lot of years to realize that too late.
yeah, yeah. So when did you realize it? I guess when did you start to embrace the progress of the thing and stop chasing the finish line?
I think probably within the past 5 years, easy. I
Yeah.
mean, I would say it's within the last 3 years even. We made a big family move from one city, from Atlanta to Savannah. And
Hmm.
it was this whole element of when I move, I'll be happy. No, that didn't work. When I golf twice a week, I'll be happy. No, that didn't work. It's just like one thing after another. When I went,
Yeah.
and I realized, oh my gosh, no, it's not. But enjoy every single day and just for what it is. And it's kind of
Yeah.
become a more of a life by design philosophy.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah. That is really cool. So what I guess in the last 3 years, how have you applied that philosophy to running? Has it changed your training? Has it changed how you think about training?
So the running I kind of actually diminished, or I should say, just kind of fell off a lot of the running. I did 2017 Boston, and
Okay.
then in 2019, so I took half of 2018 off because I was dealing with some injuries and whatnots.
Hmm.
And then I started going, well, I think I want to try to requalify again. So I really got back into training heavy, and I went to
Yeah.
Fargo at the beginning of 2019. It was in April or May of 2019. And Fargo is one of the top qualifiers for Boston. And I was really good up to about mile 21. Really good. And it wasn't because I crashed. but the way the course runs, it was unnecessarily 43 degrees, 30-mile-an-hour winds with rain, side wind.
Jeez.
And so on the last 5 miles, you come to this part in Fargo, and you basically turn right in this neighborhood, and you just go north for 5 miles. I think
Hmm.
it's, I don't know which direction it really is, but I was going directly into the wind. I turned,
Hmm.
and the wind stood me up.
Oh
I
my
went from a
gosh.
lean
Crazy.
to a stand up, and I went from 7:30 to 7:45 to 8 to 8:15 to 8:30 to 9, and I was like, I'm done. And I think I
Yeah.
finished, and I think I had to finish again at like 3:25, and I think I finished 3:28. And I was so mad because the weather just killed me, and
Yeah.
it was so cold. And so then I was just like, I don't know. I signed up for a thing called I think it's called Seven Continents Marathons or something like that. And
Hmm.
it's this club you can join. And this is really kind of interesting if you've never heard this. But it's
Yeah. No, I have not.
so I think it's called Seven Continents Marathons. And basically, it's a club you can join, and it might be $1,000 or $500 or something. But they will guarantee your entry into any race,
Oh, no way.
except for Boston, because you have to qualify. I
Yeah.
think even they might even do Boston under a charity guise, but I wanted to do the Abbott Six at the time, right? So I wanted to do
Yeah.
Chicago and whatever. So I ended up going to New York, and it was no, December 3rd, maybe 2019, and I got an upper respiratory about 3 days before I went up there. So we're
Shoot.
flying up there, and I'm starting to cough. So I went out there and started the race, and about 10 miles in, I was just hacking.
Mm.
So I finished Boston. The short version story is I finished Boston. I'm sorry, New York, and then came home, and COVID happened almost immediately in the news cycle. So I don't know
Mm.
if I had an early case of it or not, but I ran New York, and that was my 12th and final marathon. And then since then, I've just we've made a lot of transitions in life. We've got kids that have graduated high school, going into
Hmm.
college. I got a kid graduating college in 3 weeks. So we just kind of made some life transitions, and I kind of
Sure.
took the running and put it to the side, and just
Sure.
became more aware of the fact that as I get older, I need more fitness, not so much cardio. So
Sure. Sure.
running kind of has taken a back seat now.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a time-consuming sport, right? Especially the
Yeah.
marathon distance. It's not like you're committing just your weekends to it. You're committing 3 to 4 days a week, and you're committing
Yep.
a couple of months to it, whatever race you're leading up to. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I probably took all
Well,
that energy and put it towards golf now.
perfect. Just put that towards another vice.
That's great.
But yeah, so taking it back a little bit, then I guess. So you were injured after your first marathon. What was the recovery like for you? Like, were you thinking that was my last marathon? I'm gonna be done from here, or were you pretty confident that you were gonna bounce back quickly and get back to it?
Good question. So I mean, my foot was just damaged, and I wore a boot for about a day, and I was like, I'm not doing this.
Hmm.
But I did change shoes, and went to something a little bit. I went to a running store and actually and I had done that the first time too, by the way. But I had gone to a naturalist store the first time, and they were like, "Oh, these
Uh-huh.
are the greatest shoes for naturalists." That's great for about 5% of the running population. The other
Sure.
95%, you go to Fleet Feet and buy Nikes or New Balance or Asics or
Yeah.
Brooks, like that, right? And I really went back into the store and said, "Okay, what do I need to do?" And they put me in some Brooks, and the rest of my career, from the running standpoint, was really great. Once I recovered, then it just became, can I get back to being as fast as I was?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then that's kind of what started feeding it, because I did a couple 5Ks, and all of a sudden I was coming in second in my age group, and then first in my age group, and
Yeah.
then second overall, and I was like, oh my, like I'm
Yeah.
47 years old and I'm beating these young punks. I was like, this is great. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun, and that was what I worked on for speed. And then just, again, I probably had a 7 or 8 year period there where I was just signed up for 2, 3, 4, 5 races a year constantly.
Yeah.
And it was just a
And
great
what
way to see everything.
was it usually one marathon a year, or were you doing multiple in a year?
Um, I think I was probably doing 2 to 4 a year.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I did 12 there, but I mean, for the first year, so the first year I did the Chickamauga, and then the next year I think I did like Savannah, Nashville, and then maybe Savannah, New Orleans. And then it became like Albany to try to qualify, and Silver Comet and Publix. And oh, I did Publix completely illegally. You'll love this story. I did Publix, and I finished it in
Uh-huh.
3:28. But it had my wife's name on the bib. So she had signed up with her friend because she was
Oh,
starting to run
okay.
marathons.
Yeah.
She was running marathons. Her friend got sick, so she was like, I'm not going to do this race. Here, you go run it. So I qualified for Boston
Under her name.
when Amy's name came across the
Oh
finish
no.
line.
Yeah.
And then when they found out, when we went back to look at the camera and realized it was me, she got a disqualification. Yeah,
No.
it was
Oh
actually pretty
man.
funny because she
Yeah.
didn't care. She had already run 2 marathons. This was going to be her third, but
Yeah.
yeah, she had run Atlanta and Publix, and this was her third one. She was doing Publix again, I think it was. And yeah, so she got a disqualification from Boston because we qualified for Boston under my name, and we weren't doing it for that reason. We were just
Sure,
doing.
sure.
I was just running the race with my buddies.
Yeah.
She didn't have the bid, and people called me Ami, which was AMY. So
Mhm.
it's Amy, right? So
Yeah.
it was just actually a humorous, kind of an interesting little side story.
That's funny. Yeah, that the Boston qualifier, that at that point you had already qualified, right? So that was just
No, 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 no. This was well before I had
oh, that
qualified.
was before. Oh,
No,
okay. Okay, got it.
no, this was
So
probably
you qualified under your wife's name before
yeah,
you had actually qualified under your own name.
yeah, that was probably 2013, and I didn't qualify till 2015.
Got it. Okay. Okay, that's funny. Yeah,
It is kind of
that's
funny.
yeah, it is. It is for sure. Um, so how did training evolve for you over time? Because you like running 2 to 4, a year. It's some that's something you're constantly training for, right? I mean, you're maintaining a base at the very least. But how did it evolve over the years? The more marathons that you ran.
One of the things I think I started doing on the off days, because I started really getting tired of running every single day. So a lot of times I only did 3 or 4 runs a week.
Hmm.
But in between I would do like insanity. So I was using speed work, like on the,
Mm.
if you've ever done insanity, like that whole workout with the P90 group, that whatever it's called, Beachbody.
Hmm.
It was a lot of quick spurts of energy, the
Hmm.
bursts. You do a ladder exercise or whatever. So I started using that to my advantage. I think it helped the fast twitch muscles a little bit. Um, and I wasn't sure because I just running every day just didn't do it for me. I mean, at some point
Yeah.
I just felt like I was falling into a lazy groove.
Yeah. Yeah. So some other, I guess, cross training in a way
I
is
wish
what
I had
you
been.
were.
Yeah, I wish I had
Mhm.
been better at it. I mean, when I got injured at one point, the one time after I qualified for Boston the first
Mhm.
time, um, my hips were giving me a big problem. And
Mhm.
I joined LA Fitness and went and started doing pool. And
Mm.
that was interesting because I never wanted to do tries, still never have. But the swimming thing was very different for me to actually
Mhm.
learn to swim the correct way, which
Mhm.
I say that loosely. I mean, I watched YouTube, but I mean,
Yeah.
nevertheless, but to actually like swim hard was a total cardio help, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised you didn't dip into the tri world. I feel like that's a natural progression from the marathon space is to move your way into
I
triathlons.
think the reason I didn't, one, I didn't want to buy a $2,000 or $3,000 bike.
Mm.
And then the second part was I didn't really have anybody that I could ride with on that standpoint. And then the third part, I think, kind of came down to my wife saying that you were never going to own a motorcycle. I didn't know anybody who hadn't taken a pretty major spill.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's kind of one of those when, not if kind of a things.
Mm.
For
Mm.
at least from my experience of the people that I was around, everybody had taken pretty major spills, and I was just like, that doesn't intrigue me that much.
Yeah, yeah. That I mean that makes sense. That's something I didn't think about, or I guess I didn't realize that so many people were at risk of being injured that way.
Yeah, I guess
But
I'm a wuss, but I mean, I had a friend
no, I
who,
don't blame you.
yeah,
It's something that's been on my mind. I've only ran one marathon so far, so maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit. But once you do it, you're like, what's next? What's the next challenge?
yeah,
Triathlons definitely have come to mind, but the biking part, I just figured since I'm a runner, that'll be no problem. I was more worried about the swimming, but it sounds like the biking's got more to it than than
I'm
maybe
more
I've
worried
thought
about my
about.
feet being locked in and just getting like,
Oh, true.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that, and we have a Peloton, so we do that. And I'm telling you, it's a
yeah,
whole different set of muscles, and it's a whole different
yeah.
beast.
Is it
Um,
something you think you'll ever get back to?
Triathlons, no. Running, I think no. I think for me, what it is now is, I'm reading a lot of books like Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
he talks a lot about this is all good and everything, but you
Mhm.
really, as you hit certain ages, are going to start losing muscle strength. And I think that's the biggest thing is I just really want to start working out more from a strength standpoint and
Gotcha.
being strong because I'm watching everybody around me and they're just getting weaker and weaker. He's like talking about like 10%, like every decade you lose strength. I mean, it's
Mm.
a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
kind of at this longevity thought now of
Yeah.
like, how do I stay really super strong?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and running's hard on your body, so um pushing yourself for that long, I'm sure is just going to continue to deteriorate and deteriorate your joints and all that good stuff.
You know what's interesting about that? You'd say that. The people that I know that run, I have a guy that's probably a friend of mine, like 60, between 65 and 70, and he's still
Mhm.
killing it on the runs. And one of my
Really?
dad's friends is 75, and he's run over 100 marathons now.
Wow.
I'll actually connect you with him. You'll enjoy that
I would
one.
love to talk to that one. Yeah.
I'll connect you with Charlie. He's such a good dude. And
That would be great.
he's run over 100 marathons and run Boston a handful of times.
Wow.
Um, but the whole thing about that is, if you continue to run, all the muscle strength around your joints is what keeps your joints healthy.
Oh, okay.
It's
Mhm.
actually counterintuitive. It's not your joints that wear out, it's the muscles around your joints that don't support your joints. And that
Mm.
creates, so it's kind of not the way you think about it, at least from everybody I'm talking to. And so
Yeah.
that's why I really want to, again, want to stay really good with like squats and strength around my
Yeah.
muscle,
Yeah.
around my joints, because it keeps everything better. And then the running's easy.
Right. Well, yeah, and a lot of the advice I've gotten so far has been to prioritize strength training early on,
Yep.
especially if I could go back, I would have done it a lot more. Definitely didn't do enough leading up to my first marathon, but that's a lot of the advice I've gotten is prioritize strength early on and mobility too, and do it often.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Again, once David Goggins. If you go back and listen to any of his books, right?
Yeah.
The things that I'm starting to realize, especially as I get older, is I would probably go back to run less, run faster, which is one tempo, one interval, and one long run. I would probably spend 2 to 3 days either swimming or doing heavy weight training. And
Mm,
then the other thing that I would add in that's not really, I don't think, talked about very much is I would probably spend 20 minutes to 30 minutes every single day stretching like nobody's business, doing either yoga,
really,
stretching,
really.
like that. Because David talks about how he locked up after 100 milers and couldn't run
Sure.
for months because of just purely like mobility.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, that's super important, and that's something that nobody prioritizes either. All the
No,
runners I talk to, nobody wants to stop and stretch. Nobody wants to strength train. Everyone just wants to
no,
run.
no. And
But
I would
it's
love to
definitely
be cool
important.
enough to have massages and stuff like that. But I mean, that even just if we didn't do that, I think that
Yeah.
would be massive. So I'm really spending more time doing those things because it becomes more and more obvious the older you get. Like it
Yeah.
goes way fast.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Um so yeah, so I guess going back again, what do you feel like was because you've got 12 marathons under your belt, so you've got a big sample size. What race what did you feel the most confident in running?
That's an interesting one. Um, Gosh, most confident running. I was really oof. All right, let's see. Chickamauga was for fun.
Mhm.
Savannah, the first time, was for fun. New Orleans, oh my gosh. New Orleans, I was trying to qualify. And you talk about a bad case scenario. We were running towards this corner, and this sheriff lady was sitting on the corner and not directing traffic. She was just sitting there for security, I guess. But like
Yeah.
people got to this corner, and some of the runners went left, and some of the runners went right. And I was
Oh
on
shoot.
qualification time. I
Yeah.
ran with 6 people, and you were supposed to go right.
Oh
I
shoot.
lost 2.5 minutes going down to a dead end street, having to turn around and miss my qualification. Fargo, I felt good. New York, I was just doing for fun. New York, actually, I stopped at a bar and had a beer at 10 miles just for fun in the middle of the
That's
race.
crazy.
I actually had a beer with my friends. It was actually a lot of fun. Albany,
That's
I felt
crazy.
really good. Albany was kind of hilly, but Albany, Georgia is the Snickers Marathon is one of the
Mhm.
better qualifiers. That was a really good race. I felt great during that one and just fell apart at the end. Silver Comet is a fantastic, simple race. I don't know if they still do it, but because it's so level, the challenge on that is you don't use your other muscles. So it's the same
Mm.
muscles for 26 miles, right? But the first Silver Comet, I was killing, and then I just locked. I mean, I remember actually, here's a great one. At mile 25, I remember stopping on the path. I was on qualification time. I was
Yeah.
probably, I was, the qualification time was 3:15. I was probably at 3:02, and I stopped in the middle of the path. I couldn't move.
Well, oh,
I mean,
just like
just
completely
locked
cramped
up.
up or
Just
everything locked up?
like my quads just locked up, and I was like, "What
Oh,
is this?" And you talk about feeling like you're in a dream. I couldn't
Yeah.
even like walk hardly. It was just like they were just
Oh
shaking.
my
It
gosh.
was the weirdest thing. That was Silver Comet was probably my favorite race both times.
Yeah.
In the sense of feeling like I could qualify and accomplish my goal.
Yeah. When you
Fargo was
when you
probably the most friendly race. I mean, people were just so
okay.
lovely up and they're just so lovely up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Publix is the hardest race I've ever done in my life.
Okay.
It's in Atlanta, and Atlanta, despite most people's opinions, is extremely hilly.
Really?
Oh my gosh, and it was brutal. But yeah, and
What
Nashville was just like raining. I mean, we were going through trenches of 10 inches of water on the run. It was horrible.
Jeez, jeez. Okay. So yeah, so is that what is has was a difference maker for you for the most part was hills and weather is what made it a whether you were
Weather,
going to have
yeah,
a good day or not?
yeah, yeah. Weather definitely had a bit to do with it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you could go out and start a race great, and if the weather was
Y-
against you, it could really,
yeah.
really be against you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Savannah, one of the years we did it in November, it was like 70 degrees, so it was actually too hot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just but when you sign up 6 or 9 months in advance, you don't know,
No, you have no idea. Yeah, exactly.
So it is what it is. I mean, it's just there are some
Yeah.
races. There's all sorts of stuff on Google about the best races to qualify
Yeah.
for Boston or whatever. But there's only a handful of more races that I would just love to do if I ever
Uh-huh.
decide to do this again.
Uh-huh.
And but I've accomplished most of what I want to accomplish.
That's great. Yeah, you've checked a lot off the bucket list for sure. So a lot of questions that I get about the marathon distance is about the routine leading up to it. So not just the training, but like the week before, nutrition, tapering periods, things like that. So before you hit a marathon, what is your say like week before routine?
So yeah, I usually maxed out 2 weeks before, um,
Okay.
right around 2 weeks before, and then basically tapered for the last 2 weeks. And you know what? I actually don't know that that's a really great plan.
Hmm.
What I found is that when I tapered 2 weeks, I had my worst races. When I only
Mm.
tapered for about a week, I had much better races. And I
Mm.
think
Okay.
there's just something
Interesting.
about your body staying in the full. I mean, I get it that it says rest your body, but I think your body's actually really, really good about just like stepping up to the plate, quite honestly.
Hmm. Hmm.
If I took that last week and just kind of said that, like, if I finish my last long run on Saturday and the next race is on the next Saturday, and on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm just kind of doing, 6, 5, 4, and kind of keeping it like that, it made more
Yeah.
sense to me to do that. To keep
Okay.
the
Interesting.
yeah, I think a 1 week to 1.5 week taper at the most was good. When I tried the 3s and the 2 week tapers, I hated it because
Yeah.
by the time I got there, I didn't feel very prepared.
Yeah, you feel kind of cold. That's how I felt too. Well, I did a 2 week taper, and first of all, for my first one, that was the most anxious I was the whole training block
Right.
because I didn't feel like I could do the things that I was training for. It was like
Correct.
felt like I was really holding myself back. But yeah, you just get a little antsy. Your body gets a little cold, so that makes total sense to me. Um, what was the longest run that you would do before you started your taper period?
I think I did a 21 or 22. I don't think I ever
Okay.
made it to the 23 or 24 like I was probably supposed to. I think I ended up wimping out towards the end because I was like, you know what? At this point in time, if I can just get to where the wall is and where
Hmm.
my real, then you're just gonna have to gut through it because you can do
Hmm.
23 all you want. I think I did 22. You can get to 22 and have a really good run or a bad run. It doesn't really matter because the day of the
Yeah.
race, the way your body is burning adrenaline and glycogen and all these other things, and that's, I think, at least from what I had always understood, the wall is pretty much where your body shifts from making,
Right.
from the glycogen to the fat. And I'm telling you, some of those races, when you hit a wall, you hit a wall hard.
Yeah, once you get to that point, there's no going back. I've heard some other ultra runners that I've talked to that talk about that point where when you hit the wall, some of them will try to over nutrition to try to get back, back over.
Yeah.
And you can't. Once you're to that point, you're done for.
Yeah, and it's just something you have to get used to, and I think that
Hmm.
when you finally figure out what that is, it's actually easier because you understand this is temporary. Give me a mile
Hmm.
or two, and it'll flip for me. But that
Yeah.
mile or two right there, and the problem with like Boston, for example, is Boston's essentially 16 miles downhill, 4 miles uphill, and then 6 miles downhill,
Yeah.
roughly. It's 16 or something like that. 16 plus 4 plus 6, roughly. And I'm telling you, when you get to the 16-mile mark and you're downhill quads the whole time braking, and then you start going uphill and you start hitting the wall at the same time. That's a nasty combination.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. It
So,
was Boston. I mean, it obviously just happened. So a lot of people have either ran it for the first time or are experiencing it for the first time. Was that the hardest race that you've ran, would you say?
um, hardest? Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it was. I mean, it was, first of all, like, again, I had qualified in 15, didn't run it till 17. So I had in the midst of that, I'd had hernia surgery, really lost all my time, and kind
Crazy.
of got to the point where I was like, you know what? I actually hit my goal by qualifying. So I was like, Boston was my number 10. And
Hmm.
I was like, I'm just going to go enjoy it. And what I
Yeah.
didn't think about on that combination was, to enjoy it, you should be in good shape. And
Yeah.
I wasn't in as good a shape as I should have been. And it was a lot more walking on that marathon than there should have been.
Really.
Yeah.
Sure. So, what do you feel like if it, I mean, for the Boston Marathon specifically, but maybe it's the same for some of the other ones that you've ran. Do you have a set of miles where you feel really good and you know where your trouble miles are, so you know mentally to prepare for them,
Yeah.
or is it different every
Yeah.
race?
No, my trouble miles are 15 to 20.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah. All day long. That's where my shift always happened. And then
Hmm.
after that, you just kind of, I don't know, I kind of went into a trance after 20. Like
Yeah.
it was autopilot, and you're running and you're trying to keep up with the music in your head or whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And you're cussing at yourself because you're like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm
Yep.
never doing
Uh,
this again.
Yep. And then immediately after, you're like, all right, when's the next one? I just did it. Way to
Yeah.
go.
Yep.
So 15 to 20, what typically are you telling yourself to push yourself through that point?
Um, for me, I'm just not a quitter. I mean,
Hmm.
I think I told a buddy of mine this story. I said I did one ultra, and it was called the Sweetwater 420. So it was a 50K, so it's at 32 miles.
Hmm.
And I did the first loop, and I got done in like 3.5 hours, and it's all through the woods, so it's a lot slower, it's a lot different, trail running and stuff like that. So you got done with the first
Yeah.
round, and I sat down, and it's typical. You get halfway through, and you can sit down and have a snack. You can do whatever. It's just a different kind of a format. I wasn't trying to
Hmm.
run and gun it. I sat down and had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a beer, and I was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm just done. I'd
Uh-huh.
already run 16 miles, and I was like, I'm good. And then it hit me. And this is kind of what, to answer your question roundabout, I
Yeah.
kind of had that first moment of like, I'm going to have to tell people I DNF'd. Like, I didn't finish, and I've never told anybody that I've quit, ever. And it
Yep.
sat on my heart for about 3 seconds. I was like, oh, I'm not doing that.
Can't do it.
I
Yeah.
can't do that. So I ate my peanut butter jelly sandwich, had my beer, and I got back up and started running again. And we finished the race, and it was fantastic.
Nice.
But it was also one of the longest races I've ever run. But it was just one of those things of, I wanted to finish it.
Yeah. You do just have to commit to it. I've talked about it a couple of times on here, but I think just knowing that there's an end is what I think can get a lot of people through.
Yeah.
It's a couple hours of your day. It's one day. It's not going to be over a couple of days. It's one day that you have to commit to, and
Yep.
when you're done, you're either going to feel like you said you're going to DNF, and you're going to have to tell people that you DNF'd, or you're going to push through it, and maybe you didn't get the time you wanted, but at least you pushed through it, and you can say that you did it.
Or sometimes it's just the little things, like when you see the old man limping by you and he's like going by you,
Yeah.
and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, heck no. That is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it kind
Yeah.
of really inspires you. You're like, let's go.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Definitely.
I think that's the biggest thing is it showed you kind of who you are to the deepest
Totally.
core.
Totally. It does. Yeah. And you find a lot of that out through training too, I think.
Oh, yeah.
When you're a lot of times you're by yourself. I know you trained with other people, but I think a lot of people go through training and go through their long runs by themselves.
Yeah.
And you're kind of casting a vote or a bet with yourself on those days when you're out there by yourself. You've got however many miles on the calendar. You could quit. It's just you that's going to know if you quit or not. But I think it's just casting a vote against yourself of, am I going to do this or am I going to not do it? You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge personal statement to do this stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
do you have it? Do you not? Who are you? And I don't, it's not to be taken so profoundly, but it is a profound statement at the end of the day.
definitely. Definitely. Yeah. So I'm curious too. I guess throughout any of your training, if it's evolved, what did nutrition look like? Like, did you do gels? Did you do, like I know some people do dried fruit, the more natural stuff. What was nutrition or fuel like for you?
So I did a lot of the hammer gels, and
Okay.
that worked pretty well. Actually, I think some of my better runs though were the things that I was using something way more natural. If you had like the runs where you had the orange slices, or you had a banana,
Mm,
or you had
hmm.
something like even as much as it sounds counterintuitive, like a PB&J, those kinds of things, your body will take care of digesting that just fine.
Sure,
The
sure.
gels actually started hurting my belly after about 2 gels.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
I and,
Yeah.
and you could over Gatorade, and you could overdo all of that stuff. And I mean, I
Yeah.
think what I would really, really recommend is going and getting a real electrolyte mix that's made for this kind of stuff, like Hammer or
Mhm.
any of those big, high end athletic companies.
Yeah.
But I mean, essentially, Gatorade is sugar water,
Right.
with a little bit of sodium in it. But I think there are other combinations that are better and better on your stomach. But I was actually more fond of eating more real food, whether it was raisins or what was some of the other stuff I took? Jelly beans. I mean, believe it or not,
Mm,
things like that.
yeah.
Like things that actually like challenged your mouth while you're going, because it would give you something to do. You just had to
Hmm.
find something that you didn't have to chew too long because you didn't want to breathe through your nose, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So it
But
couldn't be
I,
too chewy.
yeah, but gels just kind of bothered me after a while, and I don't know, because there was just not enough sustenance to it. I mean, granted, it's 100 calories or whatever, but it just
Right.
wasn't enough.
Yeah. I've experienced that too, especially, and gels are tricky because if you don't take enough water with them too, you can really upset your stomach, and then
Yep.
it's really hard to bounce back from that. But you're probably the third person that's sent that I've interviewed that have gone more towards whole foods or natural foods. And I know for me, when I was getting started, all I saw were brands, like the Goo brand, Huma, which are great brands, don't get me wrong, but that's what's fed to you as a newer runner is you got to try all these new things. If you're
Yeah.
going to take it serious, you got to get into gels, but I don't think you do. I think you just need to try out a few things and figure out what's best for you, but definitely don't feel
Yeah.
like you need to dive
I mean, it's
into
a good
the
combination of a
gel
lot of
world.
things. But if you watch people who do ultras, they don't do the gels so much. They're actually stopping and
Yeah,
actually eating.
right, right. Yeah, that's important for sure. Um, cool. So looking back, how did you feel like you kept yourself on track for so long? So for 12 marathons, what was the motivation that kept you going through the whole thing?
It was all about Boston. That's all it was. I mean, basically, I did the first one
Yeah,
for fun, and then the second one was like, well, this will be fun. This will be with a group of people. And then the third one was like, wait a minute, they're actually saying that this could be good. And then I
yeah,
swear the next 4, 5, 6 marathons probably was like, let's just see what happens. And I think over the course of the next three years, I probably ran another. That was probably 6 or 7 more marathons, all trying to qualify. Because now it
yeah,
became like, let's just see what happens. Where am I at? And it was not, like, even if I ran a 3:28, which wasn't even close, or a 3:38, it was an element of like, well, the first one was like 3:58, so we're getting better, we're getting better, we're getting better. And then it became, what do I have to do? Because I'm having that taste for it. And then it just became Boston ODC. I mean, or
yeah.
obsessive OCD. Um,
Uh-huh.
I was just obsessed with, I had to do this. So that
Yeah.
was that was the whole drive. And then after a while, I was like, well, I'll do the Abbott 6, but it never played out that way because, again, life was changing so much.
Sure.
And
Sure.
and then just the commitment. Good Lord, the commitment to
Yeah.
get ready for a marathon was so much. I was like, okay, I need to switch up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. How many world majors have you ran?
I think it would just be the two, Boston and New York.
Boston and New York.
But
Okay,
again,
cool.
that 7 continents, the things they had access to was all 6 Abbotts. They also had access to Antarctica, which I was really intrigued with,
Wow.
right? So I mean, like, I was thinking
That
like
would be cool.
hit all 7 continents. I mean, I thought that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
But again, my wife doesn't love to travel, and this became another part of the picture. Is that I was like, I'm going to go to Antarctica alone. I'm going to go to the China Wall alone. This isn't
Yeah.
what it's supposed to be.
Right, right.
And that kind of switched up my motives on, honestly.
Shifted focus. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, still cool that you got to run too though.
Yeah.
The New York
Well,
and
she did
Boston
Boston
are
with
two
me.
great ones.
Our whole family,
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
our whole
Yeah.
family went to that one. And New York, I took a buddy from Atlanta, and he went and did the trip with me. So all the other stuff was pretty much regional, so it was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I have goals of running at least one. I actually just applied for the London Marathon today, so fingers
That
crossed
is
that we get
awesome.
into that one.
That would
That would
be
be
such
great.
a good one.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hoping for the best, but we'll see. Okay, cool. Well, looking back on everything, I know you dropped some advice kind of throughout, but what would be a few pieces of advice that you'd give to somebody that's looking to train for their first marathon, or maybe they've signed up and they're just getting started?
I think one thing is the expectations. Like, have a longer game plan than you anticipate. It doesn't. You're
Hmm.
not going to necessarily look at a 6 month plan and go, okay, I'm gonna get from here to here. It doesn't happen that fast for most people. There's a lot of
Hmm.
physiology being changed here. Um, I think one of the things is also I'd really work on strength because, like, for example, with Boston, you're just shooting the quads, you're braking the whole time. You don't realize it, but you're coming downhill. So strength would be massive, like building a lot more strength
Hmm.
than you think, not just cardio. But the other part is the expectation really is like, okay, if you're running a 350 this year, maybe shoot for a 340 next year, not the 320 to qualify, but like understand it may take you a minute to get there. Because if you do it
Yeah,
too
work your
fast too,
way.
you really risk the injury factor, and the injuries are real.
Yeah, yeah. And what would be some advice? Because injury is obviously a big thing in this space. So what would be some advice you'd give to somebody who's maybe experienced an injury like you did, um, bouncing back from something like that?
I think the biggest thing I wasn't doing was stretching. I mean, I had the tendonitis just like the rest of us. I had all sorts of plantar. I still have basically like a bursitis in my heel that just makes a protrusion on the back of it. I mean, I think it a lot more stretching, especially post run, but even
Hmm.
pre run would be massively beneficial for all of us.
Hmm.
And then again, if you counter that with some strength, I think a lot of the injuries go out the window because you're not dealing with weak parts of your body. Whereas when we run, we're using the same set of muscles over and over and over, and the supporting muscles aren't necessarily getting work like we think they are. So
Yeah,
I think that's a big part of
yeah.
it. The second part, the nutrition, would be that I would work I would work out a nutrition plan in general. I was eating whatever could get in front of me, basically. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
And I think that's the other thing too is really watching. And I'm not trying to say like diet, but just being really purposeful about eating a ton of protein, probably not
Yeah.
not loading up on carbs because believe it or not, you'll find it with whatever you need. But the
Right,
protein will
right,
help the reconstruction of the muscles you do break down. And I don't think I was doing enough of that. I think I was carving up like everybody else says you should do. Instead of spaghetti,
right,
maybe I should have done chicken.
right, right.
So
That makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah. And did you ever work with a coach throughout any of this,
I,
or was it
no,
all
I did.
you teaching yourself?
No, I
Okay.
after I qualified for Boston, after I hired another coach in Atlanta to get me back to Boston, and that was the guy that was training me all the way into Fargo. And then after I got done with Fargo, I was just like, I'm done with the competition. I'm just going to go run New York for fun.
Hmm.
But no, I mean, I worked with a coach for about a year, and it was pretty beneficial. He would give you a plan. There's just so many plans out there now, though, that honestly you could
Yeah,
do for free.
yeah, yeah. So you feel like you could find resources out
Oh,
there without coaching in the
absolutely,
beginning. Hmm.
absolutely,
Hmm.
yeah.
Cool. Well, the last question I really have is just what's coming up next for you. I know you're kind of out of the running world, but what do you have on the plate for the next couple of, I guess, for the next rest of the year?
For me, I'm really again getting back into. I work out about 5 6 times a week, but I mean, it's
Yeah,
probably 2 to 3 runs, 2 to 3 weight workouts. Um, from a personal level, I'm trying to work on my golf game. To be honest with you, I'm kind of obsessive compulsive about when I get into something that I really want to be good at. That's the one thing.
yeah.
But I mean, I've got a lot going on. I mean, I've got real estate teams in Atlanta and Savannah, and and then for and then I do the I golf probably once or twice a week, and then I do a little bit of
Hmm.
investment properties and stuff like that. And then on top of all that, I play drums for the Savannah Bananas on the tour.
Which is so cool.
So I mean, I spend a lot of time just kind of putting a life by design together, and
Yeah.
so that's probably the most of 2024. My son graduates high school in 3 weeks. I'm sorry, he graduates
Awesome.
college in 3 weeks. And
Awesome.
so he will be joining the Savannah Bananas this summer. So we'll be doing that tour together for the rest of the year. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
so we're just kind of at an interesting stage of our life where that is kind of what I'm doing is just a life by design this year and just enjoying that chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah, not massive fitness goals right now, but just starting to really eat. There's a great app I just downloaded called Track My Fitness. I've been really kind of watching my calories and just kind of, I'm above 50, so I'm kind of getting to that point where I just really want to see how good of a shape and longevity wise I can stick around here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, you've got a lot of even if it's not running, right? I mean, you've got a lot coming up this year, so that's awesome
Yeah, just
to
lots of
hear.
fun. Lots of fun.
Yeah,
Where's your
that's
next
great.
race?
My next race, so I just ran a 10 miler yesterday. That was my first race back from the after the marathon. But I've got a half marathon next month, and then I'm training for 2 marathons later this year.
Okay.
So I'll be able to get in 3 this year,
Which
which will
marathons are you doing?
be great. Just some local ones. I'm doing one in Durham, North
Yeah.
Carolina, in October, and then I'm doing there's a big race in Raleigh called the City of Oaks Marathon.
Okay.
Doing that one in November. So we'll
Nice.
be back to the marathon training pretty soon.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, again,
Yeah,
the reason I would say that run less, run faster is because I like the balance of the fact that you're not just monotony of run, 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 run,
yeah,
and that it counteracted every muscle on your body, so that when you do run, you just feel stronger. And that's, I think, the
yeah,
biggest thing that became hard is that I got in a rut.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's why I'd encourage it. And again, if weight lifting or whatever is not in that plan, I might have made it up and put it in there myself. But if
sure,
it's not in there, I would definitely do weight at least twice a week, like lots of
yeah,
squats, lots of lunges, and jump squats and stuff like that. Working on like explosion, because that'll
yeah,
help you with the propel and the push off your toe box, and I think that would be really
yeah.
really good.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna look into that after this because I just ran yesterday, my race yesterday, so I'm starting a new training block now. And that's one thing that was tough to fit in was running throughout the week,
Yep.
working a full time job, obviously.
Yep.
So something where I could work on a couple of specific areas a few times a week and still build distance on the weekends. That sounds like a
Yeah, I
perfect
mean,
plan.
at the end of my running, like really running for these things, I was probably running 5 to 6 twice a week and 15 to 20 on the weekend. I mean, I wasn't running more than 30 miles.
Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah,
that's probably not enough. Fact is, it's just probably not enough. But if you do it with purpose on each of them, you found that one was quick, fast twitch, one was the pace run, the tempo run,
yeah,
and then the long distance, obviously, you're supposed to keep it within a reasonable rate. But I mean, a lot of that was just teaching your muscles to produce on a much longer term.
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know that there's a way to do it. Meb for Mortals is a fun book too,
yeah.
and
Okay, cool.
that's a really good one. Meb wrote, so he has some good stuff in there as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a great recommendation. I'll have to check out some of this stuff. I'm at a turning point, so I'm excited to go do some research now.
Absolutely. I really
Uh,
encourage you on this next chapter. Just enjoy the journey. That's my biggest thing. Out of out
yeah,
of all of it, I did all of it, and it's like blink, it was gone.
yeah, yeah. Just enjoy the whole process of the thing. I think now that I'm through the first one was just like, am I a runner? Like trying to identify with it, you know.
Right.
Um, just trying to build distance, trying to see if I could do this thing. But now that I've done it, I'm definitely more focused on just the training process of the whole thing, making sure I'm staying present for every run, um, making sure I have the goal in sight, but enjoying the process along the way for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And I'm honestly,
Yeah,
one of the things I think that would be really kind of cool too is if I had to go back into it, I'd probably spend a lot more time encouraging others instead of being so selfish about it. Because I was
yeah,
very all about me on that.
sure, sure. Yeah, it was your goal, your Boston
Yep.
qualifier. You got to accomplish that goal. Yep.
Yep. So I think that there's a lot. I mean, there's such good lessons, and I mean, marathon runners are so just unique people. I've never met
Yeah.
one that I thought was a normal person ever.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's cool to have that community of people around you because you talk to like I talk to people at work and they think I'm absolutely crazy, but then I talk to runners and I'm just one of the runners. So it's great to have that community of people around you.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, it's fantastic. So if I can be any help to you, you got my number, so reach out to me.
Yeah, 100%. And I really appreciate you coming on today. This has been awesome. I've learned a lot. Hopefully the people listening have learned a lot as well, but I just really appreciate you coming on.
Well, cool. I appreciate you. I appreciate the opportunity.